Will.
All right, Will. I'm going to hand it over to Will. We're going to talk a little bit about mini scripts.
Oh no, I'm actually I was gonna talk about that, but I decided to just change it all.
Another change.
You should be able
That's
to
fine. I'm just doing what I'm told.
Yeah, present.
Okay.
I'll stop sharing then. You guys are going to hijack.
Yeah, let me just share one sec. Hang on.
Are you guys seeing my screen anymore? No, you see me.
We are seeing you, and I'm going to share our screen
Great.
here.
Great. I see you too.
Switch students. Oh, you're not sure inside. Oh, maybe a Chrome.
Let's see.
Undo. Yes, that one. That one. Yeah. All right. You see that?
And let me please.
Is that?
Can everyone see that?
We all good?
Yep, we can see it at home.
Perfect.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Lightning Network, but maybe something you might not expect. So it's titled. This is titled Lightning Network: More Than Just Payments, and I'm going to explain what that means. But you can actually do some really interesting things with just the protocol, the communications protocol on the Lightning Network, without even doing any, not including any of the payment layers. So I'll explain exactly what that means. So that's just an overview. The Lightning Network at the base level is an ultra-secure way of sending information between two computers. It's more, in some sense, more secure in how we access the web based off the security protocols they use on the web. Like when you see that green lock in your browser. We can utilize this. Communications protocol to build interesting apps that can talk to Lightning and Bitcoin nodes directly, without having to go through the web. So, why you might want to do that? Yeah, so I'll kind of get into that, and we'll see what types of applications are possible. So yeah, internet communication, the modern age, the web. So typically these days, commerce is done through the web. So the web is defined as a suite of protocols such as HTTP, TLS. These are just protocols that your browser uses to connect to a server and exchange information encrypted using this technology called TLS. There's a problem, which is that depending on the web is a security liability in the sense that it can never really truly be secured because of the centralized nature of certificate authorities. So intermediate certificate authorities can forge certificates allowing interception of traffic. This isn't just a theoretical idea. This actually happened by state actors in Iran to snoop on Gmail users. I think it was in like 2008 or something. I can't remember the year, but it was a big deal at the time, and then they had to really lock down the security. But these are the types of things that are possible on the web, because on Lightning you might notice there's a giant pub key that's in front of your IP address when you connect to a Lightning node. So that in some sense is the key which you use to create a secret shared session. But on the web you need to get it through other means. Yeah, so due to the sensitive nature of internet money, it deserves a better protocol for secure communications that is simpler and that can't be intercepted. So this is why I was kind of hey, maybe we could use the Lightning Network itself for more interesting things rather than just what it's currently being used for. So the Lightning Network is an entirely distinct internet protocol from the web with its own security properties, like I mentioned. And so, Lightning nodes connect to other Lightning nodes. So if you can connect to it in a similar manner than a web server, why not just communicate to a node directly to do things? This isn't really currently being done on the Lightning Network. Usually the Lightning nodes only talk to each other, and they usually just use it for channel establishment and sending payments. But what we can see in a sec is that you can actually build some interesting things outside of the standard way things that it's currently being used for. So just as a side to kind of motivate why this is important, due to the nature of Bitcoin privacy and the importance of holding your own keys, the ideal way to use Bitcoin as a business or a user is running your own nodes and having control of your keys on your own hardware. So this is the ideal. So a lot of people say this might be too difficult, or it's I don't know how to run it. I don't know how to install software on a node. So the goal is, as software engineers, as developers, we should be making this as easy as possible, because this is fundamentally the best way to use Bitcoin, and we need to make it easier. So the types of things I'll be talking about here hopefully will make it easier for people to run nodes without having to run a whole bunch of other software, and they can just, which I'll get into in a sec. with Bitcoin Core and a Lightning node, you can keep your transactions completely private, so you don't have to outsource anything. So you don't have to announce your keys to the world and leak your privacy. So there's a lot of benefits of just having your running your own Bitcoin node and your own Lightning node, because then you have basically a working bank and Visa stack within your own home or organization, which is pretty powerful. So now that we all agree that running a node is the best way to interact with the Bitcoin economy, what's the best way to interact with them? So currently the way that people currently interact with their Lightning nodes is that they'll install it on an Umbrel node, and then they'll open up a Tor connection, and then you use some weird complicated HTTP API to like get into your node, and then that thing connects to your Lightning node. It's just very complicated. Ideally, what we want to do is just run a single piece of software or two pieces of software, Bitcoin Core and Lightning, and then just interact with that directly from anywhere from apps. So this is kind of what these general ideas. So Lightning as a communication layer for the Bitcoin economy. We can utilize the Lightning network itself as a means to interact with the Bitcoin economy without relying on the web servers, web services, and custodial web platforms. So we can this will also reduce the burden for businesses and users, because all they'll need to do is plug in a small computer, and then there could be a standard API for accessing things over Lightning, which I'll get into. I'll give you some examples of what that would mean. So it shifts a lot of the burden of development onto the client applications instead of forcing a business owner to run a whole bunch of different point of sale software or things like that. We can actually move a lot of the logic to apps, and then so again, toward the goal of having less burden on businesses to like run a lot of software. You should be able to just get a Bitcoin computer, put Bitcoin Core on it, put a Lightning node on it, and then it should just work. So how would you do that? So this is, at a high level, this is the entire network, Lightning network protocol. So you'll see it's kind of, there's a lot of things involved, but at the very lowest level, there's the transport layer, and this is what we care about in terms of what I'll be talking about. And everything above, sorry? Yeah, is that something? So everything above this like red area is just like payments, but we don't even have to deal with that. We can just deal with like this communication layer. So on this communication layer, we have we have the noise protocol for encryption, and then we have this like very easy to use packet format called TLVs, which are composed of 3 data elements: type, length, and value. And by using custom data in these packets, we can talk to a Lightning node as if we were making a web request, so we don't even need one. So here's kind of like one possible workflow. Let's say you're running a Core Lightning node, of course, at home with your Bitcoin Core node, and you want to simply scan this invoice and pay for it. So one thing you could do is just simply send an RPC request directly to your Lightning node saying, pay this invoice. As far as I know, there's only one app that does this, which is my app called LNLink. But my argument, hopefully I can show that there's a lot of good reasons why you'd want to do this way, so you don't have to like deal with expiring certificates and the certificate authority issues and using the web. So this is like one use case, is just using your phone to pay for things. So the benefits of a setup like this: there's no web dependency, as I mentioned, and low latency. So one issue with Tor is that the Tor network at any given day is like, who knows if it's going to even work. And it's unfortunate that even a lot of Lightning nodes are set up by default to only use Tor, so it's like it creates some instability in the Lightning network itself. And just like you don't want a payment system where you're going to pay for something and the Tor network's down, you can't buy your apples or something. I don't know. And then you're just sitting there at the vendor, you're like, oh, this is awkward. So we want to have something that's more reliable than having to use Tor for everything. So if you just use the Lightning network, it's just plain old internet protocol that's very fast. So why not just use that? You also have some other benefits. Since you have access to your node's RPCs, you can manage your channels remotely. You can, do point of sale stuff directly from your phone anywhere, which is kind of cool. And no Tors needed, no VPNs needed. So very simple. We want to again minimize the amount of software you're running to like use your node. So I have another example here, which I ran an experiment. So I have this website. I was just trying to raise some money to like buy an Android phone for an app I was working on, and people on Lightning sent me 3 million satoshis, which was like $1,000. And this website is just a single page that has this that has a little bit of JavaScript on it that talks directly to my Lightning node, and it's and that's all. It should be that easy. Anyone should be able to just take a little bit of JavaScript and a little bit of HTML and just point it in their C Lightning node and just have a crowd fund. Like, why do you need to use Tallycoin and there are all these complicated integrations? You can do that just by calling RPCs directly on your Lightning node, which is kind of cool. So here's like the code to that does all that. It's just a couple lines of JavaScript. Another example I threw together 2 days ago. I wanted a way to view my Bitcoin Core node remotely. So I'm tunneling Bitcoin Core JSON RPC request over Lightning, and I was able to create a GUI from my Bitcoin Core node. So I was just trying to see you can actually use this technique to kind of access things that were typically kind of hard to access on if you're running a node. Especially since Bitcoin Core is not designed to be accessed from the external network, typically due to the web concerns as described on previous slides. Lightning provides a secure way to access your node remotely from a mobile app or a web page. You can generate addresses, get notifications when you receive money, receive Bitcoin, and manage your wallet from anywhere, and a lot of other different use cases, which I don't think, and no one's even really doing this right now. So.
Can I quickly ask, does that mean you need to use the CLN on-chain wallet?
So it's a good question. So right now I'm using C Lightning or Core Lightning, sorry, Rusty, because they have a really good plugin system where you can basically create these RPCs over the Lightning Network, and it's very little bit of code to do that. And Rusty even wrote this awesome plugin called Commando, which exposes Core Lightning's RPC over the Lightning Network, which allows me to do all this stuff. But you can imagine but that's just one implementation RPC. You can imagine a future where we have a standard Lightning RPC that is like all the nodes implement, and then you can this will just work. You can just use any Lightning node and just interact with it with some standard set of remote RPCs, which are remote procedure calls for those. Again, yeah.
So does it require having your channels, or only like through pub keys? You just have to set up your own Lightning Network node without even access to like Bitcoin Core, maybe. Like, what's
yeah,
the
that's a really interesting point, because again, if we look back here, so this is all the stuff we're ignoring above the red box. So in some sense, this is just like a secure communications protocol, which we're tapping into. Because typically when you're running Lightning node, you have it exposed to the network anyway. So
it's not the gossip layer, right? It's not the same. What's
really interesting is that if you open up a Lightning connection using this library that I wrote called LN-Link, which I'll talk about, you can actually receive gossip to your browser. If you wanted to, you can actually like start to build a gossip map in your browser, and then using that, you could in theory do onion messages from your phone without even running a Lightning node, which
so
is
it's just Lightning Network client, and you don't even have like underneath like the Bitcoin client to the
yeah. So I basically I send the init message, and like that's it. Like, that's all that's really required in the spec. And my feature bits I just set to 0 because I don't really have any features. But you could actually take your you could actually keep expanding on that. Like I'm only using the very basics, but you could fully interact with the rest of the Lightning.
You're gonna have to start responding to pings, otherwise we will hang up on you too.
Oh, that's good. That's really good to know, actually. But it's interesting because most of my use cases.
It depends. You've got 60 seconds, right?
Yeah, but that's good to know because I was possibly going to use it for maybe like payment notifications. So if I'm not responding to pings, I don't want to get disconnected from that. But from right now, most of my, which you can actually see from this code, I actually just disconnect the minute I get a result back from the RPC. So that's my use cases. But this library is general enough to hold open a connection and respond to events and things like that. So I will actually add support for handling pings to the. That'll be good to know.
Cool.
So yeah, all of these examples use a library that I wrote called LNSocket, which is a C library, a Go library, and a JavaScript library for sending and receiving these packets, these TLV packets. So it'll work on browser, mobile, or server-to-server. It works on the browser because I think Rusty implemented the WebSockets method of connecting in C Lightning. As far as I know, Core Lightning is the only one that supports that right now, but you're able to just open up a direct connection right from your browser if it's HTTP, not HTTPS, but a direct connection to your C Lightning node from the browser. I think that's so cool. Like I don't know, just being able to do that is like that's just so cool. And you can do there's other use cases which I even show, which are server to server. So I actually implemented an LN address, an LN URL server because I don't want to run a web server at home, so I can actually just use this RPC to like fetch invoices remotely. So I have my server in like the US somewhere, my VPS. which just like uses the Lightning Network to talk to my Lightning node at home, fetches an invoice, and actually implements LN Neural Server. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, so that's what that is. So that's the, if you want to try it out, that's where it is. And I can kind of skip through this. It talks about the plugins, which I already talked about. So yeah, in conclusion, Lightning enables a way to securely access Bitcoin and Lightning nodes over the internet with low latency and high security, while at the same time making it simpler for people to interact with their nodes without being a hardcore computer nerd like me. So that's the goal. I want more people to do, like, I have all these cool apps I'm playing with, and like, I want to have other people to play with them because they're really cool.
So a good question, because there's a lot of like these sort of new wallets that want to implement some type of like peer-to-peer connectivity between each other, like CoinJoin wallets or things like that, where you need to connect people between each other, right?
Yeah.
And they usually, the best way for that is to run on top of Tor, because now you don't have to like expose your IPs through your modem or whatever to outside. You just have Tor address and it's easy to connect. Is this use case that maybe this use case would be able to replace it in some way? This like Tor communication?
I don't think this will. So what this actually works with Tor. I don't ever use it in that way because I don't really like Tor.
No, it's just if it's able to like replace this communication between people, having this layer like Lightning layer without having Tor layer to expose people to each other to peer-to-peer communication.
Yeah, typically people are running like a Tor endpoint because they want that privacy to begin with. So like unless they're willing to move away to IPv6 or IPv4, then.
But for many wallets, it's just for communication. It's
so if they want to drop their Tor requirement and just do like peer-to-peer Lightning comms for their custom use case, then I don't see why they couldn't do that, because it's like it's just the noise protocol. It's like it's the same protocol that WireGuard uses for their VPN, so it's super secure. I'm sure it's not exactly like the noise protocol. I'm sure Rusty will correct me, but it's as far as I know, it's based off that.
Because like for example, I've got like practical example. Like I've spoken with Shortbeats people who created their wallet, and there's like peer-to-peer discoverability between the wallets, so you can create like these bets like between me and you, and they put it on top of Tor because like it's just way easier for people to just run it on their own machines and have like exposed ports through Tor rather than through like allowing it on the routers or things like that.
It seems like the main use case of Tor from what I've seen is like people who don't want to open ports to their it's like there's got to be a better way to do it. Yeah. So just continuing with the conclusion, it enables developers to create apps that interact with Lightning and Bitcoin nodes without having to force people running these nodes to install any custom software, which increases in the complexity and maintenance burden. So this is implying that like you'll be able to install a Lightning node with all this functionality built in without having too many plugins to install, which would be the ideal scenario. Obviously, we're not there yet, but that's obviously the goal. And it looks like, so I think this is kind of profound because I've been playing with these technologies for a while, and I think it really starting to look like Lightning could become like the communications layer for the Bitcoin economy. If you're able to, if it's very easy to interact with Lightning nodes and Bitcoin nodes in a peer-to-peer fashion, what kind of apps could you build with that? Like next app that I want to build that I'm thinking about right now is I want to see if I could build a complete e-commerce platform with just calling RPCs, and like I don't see why I couldn't do that. Like I might require a couple plugins if I need some extra state for customers or something, but I feel like I could probably do that, and that's pretty cool. I don't know. And that's what I've been playing with lately. Any questions?
Yeah, how do you authenticate to your nodes?
That's a really good question. And we have Rusty here, and Rusty invented this awesome library based off of this concept called macaroons.
What was the question?
How do you authenticate these requests?
Macaroons or runes?
So it's not macaroons. So Rusty, Rusty he can identify like what is useful in a certain idea, and he distilled it down. I actually find the primitives he implemented in his runes library very useful, because macaroons are these very general ideas where you just put basically strings into this authentication token, and then it's up for you to determine what those strings mean. But I feel like runes add a bit more structure in terms of like rate limiting and some extra things like method. It's just puts more structure on the macaroons, I find, which is really useful. So in the demos I gave, like for instance, on the Damus crowdfund example, I have a macaroon which says you can only use this to call the invoice method, which you can only use for like fetching invoices. So if people like you couldn't use that macaroon to like send money away from my node, right? And you can add other restrictions as well. So it's a very powerful authentication mechanism. And you can also have them expire, so you can add a time expiration on the macaroon. So let's say like I have like a read-only macaroon for all my methods for some reason, and I'd say, okay, you can just read everything on my entire node read-only, but it'll expire after a day. So like, I'll give you my node to play with for a day. And someone actually did that to me. They actually, here's like a read-only macaroon with like no expiry. I'm like, okay. And I was able to like, which was really interesting because I was able to fetch offers from their node to like for testing, which was really useful for testing my app that I'm working on. So you can do some really cool things with this type of technology.
So you mentioned that there's no web dependencies.
Yes.
So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so you can imagine a situation where you see a Bolt 12 printed out on a piece of paper and I want to pay it. So you can pull up LN Link and scan it. It'll do my LN Link app does not even talk to the web at all. It only communicates Lightning. So it'll open up a Lightning connection to my node at home, send the payment, and we're done. And you don't have to worry about like certificates expiring or TLS, centralized certificate authorities, and things.
Right.
It just works. I think that's pretty powerful. I think that's like it's like, what else could we do, right? That's the first step, but what else can we do?
But you're still it's not encrypted then.
It's encrypted. Oh, so these base level, it's in some sense more secure than the web because it's using the noise protocol, which is this amazing. So you'll see here it says noise, and it's using SecP 256K1 keys, and has this basically that pub key when you connect to a node. There's a giant pub key. It uses that to create a shared secret for encryption. And it's like you don't have to worry about being man in the middle because like you. So the LN socket library will actually just generate a new random private key every time you connect.
Yeah.
So it's like it looks like a new Lightning node every time you connect, but you'll also be able to set that key as a client and say like, and on your Lightning node side you can say whitelist only this key. I only want this user to connect to me. So that's another layer of authentication that you can add. So instead of letting anyone in, you say like I only want people within my organization or that have this key. I don't know. And again, it's just a much more secure way to. Anyway.
Interesting.
So
And the runes are often tied to a specific key for this reason, right?
Yeah.
William, one question. Like when two nodes, like I go to ThunderHub, for example, and from my node I say add peer, and then my node starts talking to that peer, right? Like they create a connection, and we send like ping pong. And
Yeah, you can do that connect, and then it'll create that connection.
Does that goes through the web?
No.
Or no? So your app is using the same system that node is using.
Yeah, like so to my C Lightning node, it looks like I'm just another Lightning node connecting to it, but it doesn't know that. I mean, it will probably know because I'm sending like 0 feature bits, and I'm like not sending pings back. But it effectively doesn't really care that I'm just like this dumb client that can't do anything, the dumb node that can't do anything. It still talks to me like any other Lightning node. So yeah.
Would there be any spam issue with that architecture?
I mean, it's you can DDoS any network node that can accept connections in some sense. So it's not something that I don't see Lightning solving that issue. Like if someone wants to DDoS you, they can DDoS you, and that's actually a big issue because on Cloudflare you can actually you can use Cloudflare, for instance, which is a CDN, which will protect you from DDoS attacks, and they can become a proxy by like man in the middling you. But you can't really do that. There's no way to do a man in the middle proxy for Lightning, which is probably a good thing, but that is a consideration. It's probably harder to stop DDoS attacks against your Lightning node this way.
But Cloudflare could just enable forwards on 9735, and then that would work.
Well, I think Cloudflare focuses on the web, though, right?
Yeah, but then just because they blocked that port, right?
I don't know if they forward like it wouldn't be.
They block it, yeah, but they could forward it.
Yeah, I don't know how. I would have to look into that. Cool. Any other questions?
So, for the Bitcoin network, the conventional wisdom is that the more Bitcoin nodes that are running, the better it is for a network. Does the same logic apply to the Lightning network?
I'm not sure if like more nodes on the Bitcoin network is necessarily better. Like for instance, you could spawn 1 million nodes on AWS, and if they're not, I see what you're saying. Like, like it's not necessarily that more nodes are better, but more nodes that are interacting in an economic fashion. So in general, yes, more nodes on Light Network is good because it'll you'll have more routes to your peers, and it'll be easier to find routes to pay for things. But yeah, I don't know if Rusty has any ideas on this, but in terms of like, I think we're gonna run into a scaling issue eventually on Lightning because I know Rusty had his million channels project, but I'm not too like familiar with like the scaling properties of Lightning. But
The idea is that more people run their node, the better.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, I mean, a lot of people are putting hope on Lightning, right, as a way that people could transact with one another in a very quick and cost-effective way. So I'm just wondering whether or not this is predicated on more people, running Lightning nodes, or whether or not right now the current number of Lightning nodes will do, right? And then we could continue to scale with, the number of nodes that we have right now.
yeah, I don't know. The more the better. Obviously, we want more people using Lightning. More adoption means that there's more channels and easier to pay routes. But yeah, I don't. Anything else? We're done. Good. Cool.